wrong. I don't know what happened, but something really wrong went like that. I don't know. What happened? Just something from the monster.
We are talking about the movie Curse of the Mayans, also known as Xibalbá. Now this one is directed by Jackeen Rodriguez and is a part Spanish spoken, part English spoken movie, and it follows the basically the Mayans predicting that obviously 2012 was going to be the end of the world, and we kind of get a bit of a prologue that 2012 wasn't the end of the world, but it was the beginning of the end. And you know, something happened, there's a discovery made, and it leads a kind of a team of archaeologists to try and uncover this kind of like ancient ruin. And you know, basically they're looking for some kind of ancient library, but what they discover is something far darker. So what do we think of Curse of the Mayans? It's an interesting film because it has some really good parts, but it has some odd pacing issues, which are kind of the main thing. So the basis of the story is this kind of team getting together, and it's a typical thing where we have, you know, this kind of professor, and he's recruiting various members of his team, and of course, as with all of these sort of things, they're like, no, they object for some kind of reason, and then they change their mind. And we've seen that cliche so many times. And eventually we kind of get going on the kind of the expedition, but on the way it's fraught with problems. They're you know, kind of held up by bandits, etc. And finally we kind of get to the kind of the actual ruins, and then the story actually starts, probably over halfway into the movie. But once we get there, we're treated to some really interesting cinematography that we don't really see in films before. Now, if you've seen films like The Descent, and probably more accurately The Cave, this basically is they kind of go into this temple which is connected to this cave structure, and there's all these kind of underwater caves. They're all real caves, and we have all this kind of like underwater photography and stuff, and it's not sets, this is real caves and things. So it gives it like a real a beautiful look when we can get to these sequences, and a really authentic look. And I would say, to plus that as well, that we have this kind of, we have the doctor, and then we have this kind of the lead person that he's recruited, this woman who is this kind of like cave diver. And it's refreshing to see someone act really professional in these type of films, and really kind of like, we hear her talk about safety things and stuff like that. And you know, normally when you get these kind of expeditions, and on films at least, you'll kind of get people acting really unprofessionally. We'll come on to that because that's in there as well. But this one character is really just, she seems so professional, and so with it, I kind of really liked her character. Initially, like when I first saw her, I thought, well, she's just going to be like eye candy on that, because it's obviously very attractive. But as the movie progressed, I kind of really liked the fact that she was basically so professional, and kind of really acted in a very kind of realistic manner, like you would imagine like a diving instructor to kind of be like, and very kind of in control. So that was good. And then finally we obviously get to our kind of creature scenes. And if you're a fan of like aquatic horror, I don't know if these are essentially aquatic creatures necessarily, but they mostly, because there's all these kind of caves in the water, and kind of, they basically seem like kind of like humanoids from the deep type thing. Now, obviously you'll get to know the origins of them throughout the movie, but it kind of comes across as a little bit like a kind of sea monster movie in a certain way, although this is all very crammed in the kind of the last act of the movie. And I've got to say this, it's very dark, so it's hard to see what's going on, but you have to remember, it's a good thing because it's realistic, because we are in, you know, a cave system with very little light, only the only light coming from like the, you know, people's torches, or flashlights if you're in the States. So it's understandable there's very little light, but at the same time when you're watching it as a film, it's frustrating because you just can't see what's going on. And it kind of points to a kind of a larger mythology. So that was all very good, but the problem is it wastes so much time in getting there. I mean, we have all this kind of like, I mean, I guess you need a bit of character building, that I understand, but it spends way too long getting there. And we have all these kind of like different relationships and kind of people shagging and hooking up and stuff like that. And it's, you know, this is what, on the other side of it, all they seem to be doing is arguing, shagging, and just kind of like acting like pissheads, basically. Apart from this one woman, but even she catches her boyfriend sleeping with someone else, but 10 minutes later she's back with him, and I'm just thinking, what? Come on, you know, it just kind of betrays the character a little bit. So that kind of, there's weird characterization here. The whole scene with the kind of the bandits, completely unnecessary, just to pad out the running time. They have no bearing on the actual plot. And it really, I would have liked to have had this movie, had the kind of like our kind of encounters and the kind of what has happened after that, maybe expanded upon, and cut maybe a third of this film out, the beginning, and expanded that last third to become 2/3. That's what would have made this a good movie, because when we get to our kind of our effect scenes and what you're actually here for, it feels just really truncated basically and kind of just too short. And you feel like you've been on this expedition, wandering through the kind of like the jungle, and you just want to get to the end. And that's what you feel like when you kind of watch this film, because it's an odd, just weird pacing, and ultimately becomes a little frustrating as well. Now, in regards to the effects and stuff, I did like the creature effects. I thought they're quite good. They're kind of, I mean, we're told they're kind of lizard men. But there's some odd editing choices with them as well, where we see very, very quick cuts that kind of go backwards and forwards, that almost make it almost makes them feel like they're hiding the kind of the effects. But I don't think they look too bad. But it just makes it look like they're hiding it. And there's a pretty decent kind of visual effects shot at the end as well, which is quite good. The acting is you know, seems okay for the most part. I think some people are maybe a little bit kind of overacting. Half of it's spoken in Spanish, like I've said, and obviously you have to read subtitles. Half of it's kind of spoken in English. But there's a lot of characters here. Some of them seem kind of a little extraneous, if you ask me. Obviously just cannon fodder. And in the kind of in the dark, it's kind of hard to see what's kind of going on a lot of the time, because you just don't know who. Everyone's got their diving equipment on, so you only ever see their face. It's really dark, and you don't know who's talking to who. To be kind of, even people who look obviously different, like the professor, who's a white guy with a beard. Sometimes it's hard to sort of see who is kind of talking to who. I would say if you kind of like creature features and you like movies like the Cave, maybe not. It's not really like the Descent. It's more like the Cave. You may want to check it out. But like I said, be prepared for a bit of a long wait until the story really sort of kicks in. And that's the biggest criticism I would say of this film. It's kind of got its priorities a little bit mixed up here. It's been far too long in this kind of beginning 2/3, and the last third is just too short. Ultimately, it needed to be expanded upon. But there's some good stuff in that last act. Normally, it's the last act that kind of falls down, and this one it kind of does, but it's just because they try to cram it all in there. Overall, it's probably worth a watch, I would say. I think it's an interesting film, and purely for some really great photography here. Really, really that last kind of like when we finally get to the temple, it's pretty decent. So I'll give it a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to you next time. Bye for now.